Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavakai Tejasvinavadhidamastu ma vidvishavakai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. So this is the last session in this series. Now, I already mentioned this earlier. Frequently, when we try to practice a higher spiritual ideal in our life, when we try to introduce a new spiritual element into our life, there will be conflicts. And these conflicts are natural. And especially when you try to practice some higher transcendental principle, there will be conflict. So, how to face this conflict? There is a verse in the Gita, it comes in the 4th chapter, Ajñascha saddhadanasya samsayatma vinashyati nayam na logosti na varo na sukham samsayatmanaha. The meaning is very simple. Those who are ignorant of the importance of spiritual values, those who do not have a sense of sanctity, sacredness and integrity, and those who are always a bit skeptical in nature, always doubtful. It is possible for us to have doubts. It is healthy to have useful doubts. There is such a thing as, a healthy way of doubting things. That is good. But frequently, when our mind is not actually willing to practice a higher ideal in our life, it takes the form of cynicism or skepticism. Now, Lord Krishna says in the Gita that this is very harmful. In fact, that is the source of all negativity. Now, what is negativity? Negativity is some kind of an invisible mental block that restricts our movements, that resists whenever we try to do something that is useful, necessary and healthy for us. We know many things which are really healthy for us, but we are not able to make use of this knowledge. There is a mental block, and the most common mental block is some kind of a negativity. Now, how to face this problem? Now, Vedanta and Yoga analyzes the functions of human mind. It's a very well-known analysis, the Yoga Sutras, Yoga literature. So there are 5 levels of human mind and its functions. Kshiptam, Modham, Vikshiptam, Ekagram, Niruddham. So these are 5 states. I am not going to make a thorough analysis of this. You can read my Yoga Sutra lectures. You will get several sessions on this particular subject. In short, it is this. Kshipta, when the mind is always in a state of lethargy, laziness or inaction, and then when it cannot move, when it is steeped in tamoguna, these are the Kshipta and Modha state. The 4th and 5th state, that is Ekagra, Niruddha, are higher states. But between these, there is one state of human mind. That's what we all go through whenever we try to practice a higher spiritual ideal. That state of human mind, that analysis of human mind based on its functions is called Vikshiptam. Vikshiptam, well, you can think of a clock, the old types of clocks, with a pendulum moving in opposite directions. It moves from one extreme to another extreme, from one pole to another pole. It doesn't stop at the middle. Now, that is how human mind functions. Whenever it tries to practice a higher ideal, like Karma Yoga, when we read about it, when we listen to a lecture on this subject, we are fully convinced that it is very important, it is very useful and very creative. And we become enthusiastic about it. But after some time, we lose enthusiasm. And again, when we read about Karma Yoga and its usefulness, how Karma Yoga brings peace and contentment in our lives, we are enthusiastic about it. We may be very much enthusiastic about practicing it. But again, when we return home after listening to the lecture, again we are back to the formal mental framework. Now, that's how a clock pendulum moves from one to another. Now, how to remain stable in our enthusiasm for a higher spiritual ideal, like Karma Yoga, for example. So, intellectual conviction or the full understanding that it is necessary for us, that it is useful for us, is not enough. Something else is working within our mind. A part of our mind, a portion of our mind is not willing to cooperate, though it is convinced of its usefulness. That is a very difficult situation, a big dilemma. So the only way to stabilize our mind, to increase our conviction and to turn our mind into a friendly, cooperating friend is to go on practicing, to keep feeding our mind with more and more ideas which will convince us of the need to practice Karma Yoga. So that's the only way to reduce negativity. Otherwise, every day we may read about Karma Yoga in a scripture. Every day we may listen to lectures on Karma Yoga. Still, it doesn't have any effect because immediately that enthusiasm is gone. So, the only way to reinforce this conviction and the only way to make our mind, to force our mind to cooperate with our efforts to practice Karma Yoga is to keep feeding the mind with those ideas, creative ideas, which the mind will automatically change the way it reacts to our intentions. That is one important thing to remember. Second important point to remember, and that is something from Vedanta philosophy. You know, Karma Yoga is a spiritualized form of a sense of duty and obligation. Normally, when we feel it's my duty to do, it's my obligation to do it, well, we are conscious of our need to do our duty, to perform a responsibility, that's true. But there is an element of strain in it, in fact. See, for example, suppose you sit in a computer, in an office, let's say for 10 hours or 12 hours, 13 hours working in a computer, and you get exhausted. And after getting tired, you want to take a long walk, or you go for hiking, or you may go for playing football, you may engage yourself in sports. Actually, hiking is much more tedious, much more strenuous. It requires much more effort. It makes you more easily tired in a physical sense. But because you have worked in an office for 10 hours, 15 hours, you look upon hiking as a hobby. But suppose you are a professional hiker, every day you walk on a mountain slope maybe for 10 hours, then you would do some computer games as a hobby. So, computer work becomes a profession, then hiking becomes a hobby. If you are a professional hiker, then sitting and playing with a computer becomes a hobby. So everything depends upon the way we look at it. A professional footballer may practice his game maybe 5, 6, 7 hours a day, and he may play computer games as a hobby. But a professional computer specialist may work with the computer for 10 hours. That is not hobby for him. That is not play for him. That is tedious effort, lot of strain, lot of sense of duty is there. And for a hobby, he may play football. So it all depends upon the way we look at things. Now the point is, if we can look upon our duty as a hobby, if we can look upon our tedious obligations as a hobby, if we can change the way we look at our duty and work, then the problem is solved. So that's why in one of the Gita lectures, there is an interesting verse. It's a very profound verse. What it says is, Kayena manasa buddhya kevalaihi indriyairapi yogina karma kurvandi sangam tektu atma suddhaye. That's the meaning here. So, great spiritual aspirants, yogis, they do all their work with the body, with the with the way they speak, the way they act, the way they work, all these becomes an offering to the Lord. So, when you work hard with a lot of obsession, lot of concerns and anxiety with the results, you become tired and exhausted. But suppose you look upon your own work as an offering to the Lord, that doesn't make you tired. You can look upon your most strenuous duties as a hobby or as a sacrament. Both have the same effect. If you look upon your most ordinary work as a sacrament, as a sacred activity, as a flower that you place at the altar of the Lord, the sense of sanctity removes all anxieties, all worries and all problems. So we can always be happy even when we undertake most tedious, most demanding compulsions or responsibilities in our life. That's why the Gita has got another very powerful verse which I want to quote and I want to explain, that in a way gives a nutshell of what Karma Yoga actually means in our life. That is, Naiva kinjit karomidi yukto manyeta tattuvit pasyan srunvan sprusan jignan shoban gachan etc. And then pralaban visijan dunnan unmishan nimishan nabi indriyani indriyartheshu vartanta iti dharayan. That is, seeing with eyes, hearing with ears, touching with the sense of touch, smelling a flower, eating food, walking, going somewhere, taking rest or sleeping, sopan, shosan, even breathing, speaking, holding things with your hand, opening the eyes, closing the eyes. All these are activities which take place at the sensory level. So then indriyani indriyartheshu vartanta iti dharayan brahmanya athaya karmani sangam tikta karodikha lipyate nasapapena padmapatramivambhasa. You offer all these activities, your voluntary and involuntary activities, to the Lord. So you just make an offering on this. Remember, this is an extreme example of a karma yogi. Well, I believe the reason why great spiritual seekers could do so much of work, could undertake so much of most tedious, most demanding work, and still remain calm and quiet and happy and composed was because they were looking upon their whole life as an offering to the Lord. That's what we talked about yesterday as a yajna, as an offering. So here you find seeing, walking, hearing, eating food. So unmishan nimishan nabi, opening the eyes and closing the eyes. And the shosan, pralaban, speaking and then breathing. So every activity is an offering to the Lord. So Brahmanya Athaya Karmani means you offer all these activities as an offering to the ultimate reality, God. Now this is the most sublime example of a Karma Yogi. Now, as I mentioned, the reason why great spiritual teachers could do so much of work without getting exhausted, without getting tired, without getting physically broken or mentally broken was because they were doing everything with a smile. Either they looked upon everything as a sacred activity, or they looked upon all their activities as a flower they were placing at the altar of the Lord. So now, this is the spiritual psychology of Karma Yoga. There is a deep psychology behind this. On the other hand, suppose you are doing puja, an offering, and you or maybe in any non-Hindu tradition, you may be engaging in prayer. In all Hindu tradition also, a lot of prayer is there. So, either in a temple or a church or synagogue, you are praying or you are meditating. Suppose you look upon praying as a very exhausting, very demanding work, then that prayer is not prayer. That meditation is not meditation. If you are tired of something, then that work that makes you tired is not performed as a Karma Yoga. Because Karma Yoga should not make us tired, physically or mentally. If our work makes us tired, if our work makes us exhausted, then there's a problem with that work. If a mother gets tired of loving her child, then there's a problem with the way the mother loves the child. Because the mother enjoys loving the child, or the child enjoys loving the mother. So there is a spiritual bond. There is a deep spiritual aspect about that relationship. So also, if we can look upon all our activities as a sacred activity, then our work should not make us tired. This is the spiritual psychology of Karma Yoga. And if you do not believe in God, then you can take the example of work and hobby. If somebody can look upon his whole life and responsibility as a hobby, then that is one way of looking at it. But it's much more easy for a person to practice Karma Yoga along with Bhakti Yoga. It is natural and it's much more easy to practice it. Because when you bring in the element of sanctity and sacredness into every micro activity, every micro moment of your life, then the whole life becomes a celebration. In fact, there is a well-known famous verse in the Bhagavata Purana. That is Nityotsavam Bhavatyesham Nityasri Nityamangalam. How a great spiritual seeker is practicing Karma Yoga makes his every day a big celebration. So every day, every moment is an occasion for celebration. Remember, this is the highest reach of an archetypal Karma Yogi. But we can begin somewhere. How do we begin somewhere? First, everyday life we must remember, we must have a sense of discerning wisdom, a kind of discriminating wisdom. What is real, what is unreal? So Karma Yoga always begins when we keep in our mind that there is some higher reality beyond and behind what we encounter in our everyday life. Even a businessman, even if he is doing business, if he can remember, well, I will not take my checkbook and fountain pen with me when I die. If he can remember that, he can start his Karma Yoga right now. The problem is, he wants to take his checkbook and fountain pen with him even when his dead body is pushed to the tube in the crematorium. And he forgets the fact that he cannot actually take with him all that he accomplishes in this world. So once this fact is remembered, once the reality that there is something beyond this world, beyond what we can achieve and accomplish in this world, when we can remember this, that can bring in a sense of spiritual common sense. That's how we can begin Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga can be begun any day, any moment. Right now, if we can think of even listening to this idea as Karma Yoga, that's the beginning. And that will take you all the way to the top of the hill. Top of the hill is, as I mentioned here, Pashyan, Srunan, Skrusan, Jignan, Sopan, Shosan, Getchen, Pralaban, Misusan, Grinnan, Unmishan. This Gita verse is there. What it means is talking, speaking, breathing, eating, walking, every physical and mental activity can become a sacred flower that we are placing at the altar of the Lord. It is the highest peak of Karma Yoga. But we can start our spiritual journey right now, today, if we can bring in this conviction. Well, I am working hard, I want to succeed, and I want to do great things, but I should remember, whatever I achieve, accomplish in this world, will one day be left behind when I leave this world. They are not absolute realities. In Sanskrit, Vedanta is called Paramarthika reality. In fact, in the Buddhist Shunyavada school also, they call Shunya is the Paramarthika Satta according to them. All these constitute, all these obligations, all these work efforts, all these constitute the relative. So once we remember that is all relative only, not eternal, not absolute realities, that itself is enough to bring in an element of spiritual common sense. In fact, that's the only way we can really begin spiritual life or the practice of Karma Yoga. So this is an important point, remember. In fact, there is a verse, there are many verses, but one very important verse is there in the ancient Sanskrit scriptures. The verse is, Yeppuman atimedhavi chadurnam ekam astude alpayu anapadyova daridra paditopiva. A very profound verse I shall try to explain in the context of our own times. Any person, any individual who is extremely gifted, Atimedha means extremely brilliant, extremely well accomplished, very brilliant, very successful, very efficient. If that person is not endued with a higher common sense, spiritual common sense, what happens, his life will end in failure. There is another verse attributed to Kalidasa. Yavvanam dhanasambhati, that is Prabhutvam avivekida ekaikamapi anarthaya kimu yatra jadushtayam. Kalidasa says, is a verse attributed to Kalidasa. Youth, wealth, a big job with a lot of followers around you, Prabhutvam. But no common sense, no understanding of the fact that all these are to be left behind one day or other. These are all peripheral, these are all transient things. They are not eternal. They are not eternal. They are not everlasting. There is one transcendental reality, and that is the only thing which is eternal. All these will have to be left behind. As I mentioned earlier, you have to leave a checkbook behind when you leave this world. So once we can remember this, that will bring us a sense of spiritual common sense. This particular verse tells us that youth, a lot of wealth, a big job, a lot of influence, and no wisdom, no spiritual wisdom, they constitute a recipe for disaster. Even one of them is enough to bring in disaster. So what to speak when all these are coming together? So that's why it's important to bring the spiritual common sense. And the spiritual common sense becomes so strongly and intensely felt when we remember that all that we normally care for in this world will not be eternal. If you talk to people who have encountered, who are chaplains or those who have to attend to the needs of people who are about to die, those who did not care for any of the higher spiritual values, frequently they become fearful, they become scared of things, because when suddenly the reality of leaving everything behind is strongly felt, they become. An important principle to remember, that is the fact that all that we consider as valuable and precious in this world will one day be left behind. We will not be able to take any of this with us. This is an important point to remember. That's why the Ishavasya Upanishad, there is a very interesting prayer, a very powerful prayer. A devotee who has led a very disciplined life, done his duty properly, his karma yoga and so on, he is about to die. Then he utters a prayer addressed to his own mind, and he tells his mind, "Oh mind, remember all the good deeds you have done, all the good thoughts you have thought, all the good words you have spoken." So this person, the dying man, is struggling to remember all the good memories that he can bring back from his past. Something he has done good, some help he has done to somebody, some good words he has spoken, some kind of good work he has done, because that is the only thing that can give you solace and comfort and peace when the reality of leaving all that we loved and considered important is going to be left behind. That's an important point, remember. I know it is not easy to practice it, but everyone frequently, at least once or a few times in his or her life, encounters this real truth. Those who have, there is nobody, those who have faced the problem, the tragedy of departed, the loved ones dying, or those who have suffered the tragedy of losing money or wealth, or unexpected tragedies. These events suddenly make us think of, well, is there something beyond what we normally consider to be the only real thing, something beyond today, beyond the present, beyond empirical enjoyments and pleasures. There's something beyond all this. But we are not able to sustain that thought for long. We forget. You go to the crematorium, you observe the ritual when your near and dear one departed ones cremated, you come back again within a few days, you come back to normal. But the real intellectual understanding of the fact of impermanence of worldly enjoyments, worldly accomplishments, if that could be sustained in our mind for long, it becomes a spiritual common sense. That's an important thing. And then you'll be able to practice what I mentioned this morning, Swadharma. So Swadharma is the kindergarten of Karma Yoga. That's something that everyone can begin with, Swadharma. A student can say, this is my duty. A doctor, well, this is my duty. This is my work. This is my Sosya Dharma, one's own Dharma. What is Dharma? You are part of this cosmic system, the cosmic existence. So you have a role to play. By virtue of your qualification, by virtue of your social position, social status, or the social situation, there are certain obligations that we are expected to perform, certain duties that we are expected to do, that we cannot avoid under any circumstances. And of course that also involves some unpleasant duties and obligations. Duties that do not give pleasure, enjoyment all the time. That problem is also there. So how to confront this problem of doing the unpleasant duty? Or what is meant by an unpleasant duty? A duty that doesn't give us immediate superficial enjoyment. That is what we normally call unpleasant duty. But when we change our interpretation of unpleasantness, then there will be no problem. So that is an important point, remember, Swadharma. Secondly, when we look upon our duty as our Swadharma, then you will be able to go deeper into our own system and we will be able to solve the problems that frequently emerge in our life. And again, it also conserves our energy. It prevents the fragmentation of efforts and energy and time. Because our whole energy can be focused on this idea, this is my Swadharma. There is no more bargaining. Otherwise the mind will be facing conflicts all the time. This is an important point, remember. So that also brings in some of the higher faculties in our system. Well, I can give how this really happens in the life of an ordinary person. Of course, I am not going to tell you the story of an ordinary person, but it's a lesson from that. In the Bhagavata Purana, there is a great interesting story. Vyasa is the author of Bhagavata Purana. Now Vyasa is not a mythological figure because we read his books almost every day. When we are discussing Bhagavad Gita, we are reading his book. He was the one who wrote these words. So the instructions are coming from Lord Krishna addressed to Arjuna. The exact wording, the Sanskrit language is the creation of the great Vyasa. So he was the most accomplished writer, the most accomplished sage and saint of his times, Vyasa. And after editing all the four Vedas, after writing Mahabharata, of his Bhagavad Gita is a small portion, he was not happy. Now how do you become unhappy and how do you face the problem? See, if you are poor and if you are unhappy, it is obvious that if you work hard, make money, you will be happy. If you are unemployed and if you are unhappy, then there is an immediate and visible solution in front of you. You try to get a job and you become happy. So, if the cause of unhappiness is something empirical, then the solution is obvious. But suppose you happen to be the most accomplished, the most learned, and the most widely recognized author and philosopher and sage of your time, and still you are suffering from depression. So what will be the solution? So that is the problem of Vyasa. Vyasa, though he was the greatest man of his time, his days, he was unhappy. And one day he was sitting on the banks of river Saraswati. And then he was in a very depressed mood. And then another sage happens to come there, Narada. So Narada confronted Vyasa and found out that he was not happy at all. He was very unhappy. So Narada wanted to find out the reason why Vyasa was so unhappy. So he asked him, you are the most accomplished writer, philosopher, with so many disciples of yours who are also highly recognized. Why are you so unhappy and depressed? You have every reason to be happy. Suppose you are the richest man in the world with a lot of multinationals under you, highly recognized, with great reputation, and still if you cannot get 2 hours sleep because you are suffering from depression, disappointment, insomnia and so on, then that is a very, very difficult situation. It's a good problem of abundance, problems of success, problems of too much, so to speak. That is a very difficult situation, where the solution is not so obvious at all. You have to look for the solution, and you have to look somewhere else for a solution to this problem. It is not visible, it is not available in this world of empirical realities. So that was the problem with Vyasa. The Vyasa told him, yes, I am unhappy, and I do not know why I am unhappy. Then Narada told him, I know the reason why you are unhappy. The reason is, you have written all these wonderful books, and you have such a high reputation, but still you cannot say you have done anything that will be of immediate practical usefulness, benefit to another person. So remember Vyasa wrote Mahabharata. It's a gigantic work. The bigger version has got more than 100,000 verses. The smallest version has got 100,000 verses. It's a huge book. So Vedas he edited. So he did a lot of great things, in fact, Vyasa. And in Mahabharata, he is discussing the subject of Dharma. The subject of Dharma, as he discusses in Mahabharata, is a neutral subject, so to speak. So what is constitutional propriety in contrast to spiritual propriety? So something which is proper and appropriate from the constitutional point of view, and something else which is proper and appropriate from an ethical and spiritual perspective. So what Vyasa discussed in Mahabharata as the principle of Dharma is more or less some kind of a constitutional ideal. So there he discusses the Dharma of a king, Raja Dharma, Dhruva Dharma, the Dharma of a monk, Dharma of an householder. What are the duties, obligations and responsibilities of people in various walks of life, in various positions in life, occupying various situations in life? That is a central theme discussed in the Mahabharata, of which Bhagavad Gita is so unique, but the teachings of Bhagavad Gita becomes almost irrelevant in the context of the huge work Mahabharata, which is so gigantic, more than 100,000 verses, and Bhagavad Gita has got only 700 verses. So it is so small. So the central teachings of Bhagavad Gita do not appear as the central teachings of Mahabharata, which contains a lot of stories of dynasties, emperors, kings and dialogues and so on. So the teachings of Bhagavad Gita got obscured in the wide context of Mahabharata. So Narada told him, you should write something which should be of immediate benefit to people who read it. When they read that book, they should feel this is what I should do for my own spiritual welfare. And this is what I should do for the welfare of others. You should write such a book which gives a direct message, which should be based on spiritual propriety. There is a great difference between spiritual or ethical propriety and constitutional propriety. Constitutional propriety is neutral. It may not be good for everyone. It is just a matter of legal propriety. Even the scourges of humanity can hire a brilliant attorney and it will be disaster for the whole world. So then when Narada advised him, well, Vyasa, you should write a book. You should author a book that will be of immediate practical benefit. And then he wrote Bhagavata Purana. And in Bhagavata Purana, the central teaching is Bhagavata Dharma. So at the beginning of the text, Edavan Sankhya Yoga Abhyam Swadharma Paridishtaya Janma Labha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. What it means is, any person can reach the highest spiritual attainment, the highest spiritual good, by practicing Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or any of the spiritual parts, of which the most simple and the most direct path is Karma Yoga. Doing everything as an offering to the Lord. In the practice of Karma Yoga, you do not have to uphold a new ideal. You don't have to give up what you are already doing and change it. No. Only you have to do what you are doing every day from a different perspective. And it is simple, it doesn't involve a lot of effort if you have got Shraddha. That's why Lord Krishna is Asaddha, Ajñascha, Asaddhadanascha. One important qualification necessary in life for us to be able to practice Karma Yoga is Shraddha. It's difficult to translate the word Shraddha into English. You may write a whole paragraph even to give any translation. What it means is a combination of sincerity, purity of heart, integrity, honesty, and unselfish quest for truth. All these, if you can put together, you have this Sanskrit equivalent Shraddha. So if you have got Shraddha, then any day, any time, we can begin our spiritual journey. As I mentioned, we do not have to give up anything, only we have to do what we normally do from a different perspective. And you know how this Bhagavata book came to be written. That is another story. I shall conclude by narrating that small interesting episode. It begins like this. One day a king was walking in the forest. It was his duty to look after the welfare of the sages and saints who were doing meditation in caves and forest hermitages. So that was the duty of rulers in ancient India. His name was Parikshit. He was the grandson of Arjuna, who is a student in the Bhagavad Gita. So King Parikshit was walking around in the forest. And it so happened, and he was a reputed king. He was well known for his nobility of character, for his sense of justice and fair play. He was a great king, well known for his kingly qualities. So one day, it so happened, as he got tired and exhausted, he came to a thick forest. There he found a cave, and he entered the cave, And there he found a sage was sitting in meditation, absorbed in meditation. So the king was tired and exhausted. So when you become physically tired and exhausted, sometimes your sense of propriety, your self-discipline also may stop functioning. I mean, you become bitter, you become mentally disturbed. So that was what was happening to this king. He was exhausted, he was tired, and he was thirsty. So he asked for water, and the sage was sitting in meditation. He did not know that the king has entered his hermitage. He was sitting there deeply absorbed in meditation. The king, in his anger, and because he was hungry and thirsty, he became angry, and he thought the sage was pretending to be absorbed in meditation. The sage did not do the courtesy when a guest enters his hermitage, his cave. And he came out of the cave and he looked around and he found a dead snake lying around nearby. He lifted that dead snake with his bow and he put it on the neck of the sage who was absorbed in meditation and went away. After some time, his son, the sage's son, came to know of this. Now I tell you, in ancient India, retired householders used to go into forest hermitages and spend the rest of their lifetime in meditation or imparting spiritual wisdom. In fact, a lot of these Upanishads and Vedas, Vedic mantras were were taught by these sages. Many of them were retired householders. This is the ancient tradition in India, when an householder sees the face of the grandchild, he should leave his home with his wife, go to a forest and spend the rest of the lifetime in meditation or teaching the Vedas. In fact, the entire Vedic literature became so well spread because of the efforts of these retired householders. They were rishis. So this sage was such a sage. So his son came to know that the king had actually insulted his father. And the son became very angry. He was also a man of strong spiritual power. And he was a youngster comparatively speaking. So he became angry and he cursed the king. He did not know who had done it, but he said, anyone who had done such a heinous crime of putting a dead snake on my father's neck will die of snake bite on the 7th day from now. And the curse became a reality. And this news was sent to the king by the sage himself. After some time he came to normal state, he stopped meditation, he came to know what had happened and he was very repentant. His son had, in his immaturity, in his anger, he had cursed the great king. So the sage was so unhappy and he sent his other disciples to the king, informing him that his son had cursed him, so he is going to die on the 7th day, he will be bitten by a poisonous snake. Now when the king heard this story, he did not get angry. That is the greatness of a man. He had done something terribly wrong. He took the dead snake lying around and lifted it with his bow and put on the neck of this great sage. So what happened was the king became very repentant. He repented and then he left his kingdom, left his palace, left his comforts, came to the sacred river banks of Ganga and sat there in meditation, expecting to die on the 7th day. Now what happened, when other sages came to know of these events, they came to the river bank Ganga to meet the king who had the wisdom not to get angry with the sage or his son who had cursed him, but could take this curse in his train without becoming bitter about it. And he said, I deserve this because I did something terribly wrong. So the great sages who gathered around him praised him for his wisdom. And among those who came there to appreciate and to talk to him was Shuka, who is the one who speaks Bhagavata Purana. So when Shuka came, his name is Shuka. So when Shuka came to the river bank, then King Parikshit puts a question to Shuka. Ata pritchami samsiddhim yoginam paramam gurum purusasya yatkaryam priyamanasya sarvata. O sage, he is addressing this sage Shuka. I want to ask you this question. I have only 7 days to live. So how should I spend the rest of my lifetime? How I should meditate? How I should spend my time in contemplation? And as a response to this, Shuka expounded the whole Bhagavata Purana, which he was taught by his own father, Vyasa. So, Shuka was Vyasa's son. So, Vyasa composed this and taught his own son Shuka, and Shuka explained this to King Parikshit. The essence of the whole teaching is Etavan Sankhiyogabhyam Swadharma Paridishtaya Janma Labha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Sputi. The ultimate purpose of human existence is to leave this world with a smile. And this should be made possible either by the practice of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga. The entire Bhagavata text emphasizes Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, all the 3 yogas. But the uniqueness of Karma Yoga is, it is something that we can start any day, any moment. As I mentioned earlier, for Bhakti Yoga you should know how to pray, how to meditate, how to do our rituals. You should be intellectually very alert, you have to study. For Karma Yoga, it's not complicated. Just do our everyday work, that perform our everyday duties and responsibilities from a different perspective. We have to look at our own life and what we do with our life and what we do in our life from a different angle, then it becomes Karma Yoga. So, and Karma Yoga, if a person practices Karma Yoga slowly, his mind also begins to evolve, it takes an ascent, and eventually, gradually, he feels this inner conviction within, well, I am doing the right thing. So, the greatest proof that you are progressing in the path of Karma Yoga is that when you do something, it produces this unique spiritual quality, which I use the word Chitta Prasada, a strange feeling of inner contentment, satisfaction and tranquility and peace. When we do anything for the good of others without a selfish purpose, it on the one hand takes us one step closer to God. On the other hand, it brings in a tremendous feeling of tranquility and inner peace and contentment. That's the uniqueness of Karma Yoga. Now we will have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. Okay.
Thank you, Swamiji, for the wonderful lecture for the 4 parts. This is our concluding session. Please type the question or raise your hand and we will ask for you. And there is one question already from Peter Moorhead, a very interesting question.
Yeah.
So, the model of Western psychotherapy for mental anguish, anxiety, depression, etc. has models for talk therapy, group support, and there is 12-step program for addiction, etc. along with some prescriptive medication. So the question is, what is missing in this model? Is there a spiritual prescription that is necessary for true healing and mental health.
Yeah.
That is
Along with these treatments, they also may prescribe certain medicines. So, work therapy is, of course, it has got a strong purposeful element in it, but social grouping. But there are cases where the patients suffer from strong feelings of self-contempt, bitterness within. In such cases, of course, it's all because of some hidden samskaras interfering with their mind. So I think I don't want to dismiss the usefulness of Western therapeutic methods, Western therapy, psychotherapy. But the point is, those treatments can only postpone the problem, cannot permanently solve the problem. Again, the fundamental principle is if we can overhaul our own mental system by generating new samskaras, that will create our inner, that will develop an inner possibility to find out our own problems. In my opinion, of course, I am not a specialist in Western therapeutic methods, but I have read quite a few books. So my conviction is, it only kills and removes the symptoms, or maybe postpones the problems, doesn't permanently solve the problems. This is my understanding.
There is one question from Cliff who asks, is there some small practice to do at the beginning of every day that can set us on the path of karma yoga for that day?
Yeah. So any noble activity, it could be some volunteering work, it could be some selfless activity, helping somebody, depending upon the situation, the convenience of the people. Any simple, ordinary activity can be a stepping stone, because gradually it will produce this inner tranquility and peace. I think the concept of samskaras is not well recognized or understood in Western psychological context. Mind influences our actions, but actions also influence the mind. When we do something noble, unselfish, without any purpose, without any selfish purpose, what happens, that activity will generate a potency in the mental system. You feel, well, I have done something meaningful, wonderful. That feeling will have a healing effect on many of the psychological problems. I do not know to what extent it is recognized in the practical methods in Western psychotherapy.
Thank you, Maharaj. There is one more question here from Indrana. In chapter 2, verse 13 of Bhagavad Gita, it is said that he is only sin who cooks for his own sake.
Oh yeah, okay.
So what does it mean in modern age? Chapter 2, 13.
Yeah, verse 13. Okay. Just a minute. Yeah. Yes. Chapter 2, verse 30. 30.
1 3.
Oh, 1 3. Okay. That's right.
So the question is, what does it mean in modern age?
Yeah, what it means modern, yeah. Yes. That is, let's see, 1 minute. Yeah, dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tatha dehandar prapti dhiras tatranam khili. That's the 13th verse.
Yes, 13, chapter 2, 13, 1 3.
1 3, yeah. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tatha dehandar prapti dhiras tatranam khili. So Lord Krishna is trying to drive home the idea that this body and the Atman that expresses through this body are two different.
He clarified it's chapter 330. Sorry.
Chapter 330. Yeah. Okay.
Chapter 3 and it's
Yeah,
that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah, Mayi Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Adhyatma Chetasa Nirasi Nirmamo Bhutva Yudhyasya Vigata Jvara. That is 330, that's what he's talking about?
B13.
Oh, 1-3, okay. Yes. Yajnasishtashinas sandhu muchyandi sarvakilpishehi bunjadetu dagam bhavaye pajandyatma karanat. So, yajnasishta means when we do a work or any activity, it has got two aspects. There are two different ways of doing our work. So, a work or any activity is compared to yajna. There are two ways of doing it. I am doing this work. I want its full result. I am the doer. I am the enjoyer. It is my work and I want the benefit. This is one way of doing. Another way of doing is, well, this is my job, this is my work. It is for the Lord. I mentally offer the work and also its results to the Lord. There, you don't physically give up the results, but mentally you offer the results to the Lord. So, shishta means what is left out. So, the results of your actions, mentally you offer to the Lord. That is called karma yoga only. Karmaneva adhigaraste ma phaleshu. So, karmani evate adhigaraha na phaleshu. Your right is only to do the work, not the result. It should not be taken in the physical sense. What it means is, what is left out, the remnants of the work, you should leave to the Lord. When you do your work with the full obsession, with the full conviction, I am the one doing it and I want a result, actually you become terribly unhappy if the results are not up to the expectations. And you become overjoyed when the results are beyond expectations. And when there is a slightest setback, you become terribly disappointed. So pain and pleasure, bitterness, joy and disappointment, all these will come one after another. When you are doing something with the full obsession, obsessive attachment to the work and its result. On the other hand, when you do the same work, well Lord, this is my karma yoga, I am doing to the best of my ability, I shall do to the best of my capacity, I will leave the result to the Lord, it is to you. That is yajna-sishta. Okay, so the point is, you offer it mentally to the Lord, and what is left out is yajna-sishta. Yajna-sishta ashina means those who eat the leftover from yajna, those who enjoy what is left over after dedicating to the Lord. When you eat the food, you cook, you eat, and you have a good time. That's one way of doing it. When you cook the same food mentally, you do some prayer, saying grace before eating. Then you know what happens? The same food becomes yajna-sishta. It means it becomes the remnant, the leftover after performing yajna. So yajna here means giving mentally offering to the Lord. So whatever we should do it as yajna sishta. Then what happens, we become freed, because every activity will produce some undesirable consequences. When you eat vegetables, you are actually taking that for your goods. So that is taken away from the world, taken from nature. When you cut down trees, you use it for your home, for building your home. But suppose you plant a seed that becomes a tree after 100 years, then what happens? It becomes yajna. So, and when it's done as yajna, it saves you from bondage, from sin. Sins here should be understood as bondage. So that's what happens. So mentally, when you offer whatever you do, mentally you offer that action and its result to the Lord, then what happens? It becomes yajna sishta, means what is left over from yajna. That will liberate you from this prison wall of worldly bondage. Otherwise, that may bind you to this world. It becomes a prison wall when you enjoy this world without mentally offering to the Lord. On the other hand, it becomes a liberating force when you do everything after mentally offering the results to the Lord. So that's the meaning of it.
Thank you, Maharaj. So this next question, a lot of practical questions on advice of daily life.
Yeah.
So question is on how to guide young people who are going through this depression in the late teenage years or early 20s, right? So the question is, what is the best remedy for these kind of teenagers or early 20s? Is it understanding karma yoga? Is it doing more meditation? Or better understanding the nature of life, the dukkha, and accepting the relative reality we face? A lot of things we discussed. So what is the best way?
So the best solution, this best recommendation is a combination of all these. First, they should be given an opportunity to engage themselves in some noble, good activity which brings good for everyone, for them and also for others. That is one thing. And along with that, many of these ideas can be inculcated. The central principle is that humanity is one family. When we do something good for others, it eventually becomes beneficial to ourselves. So that important point should be stressed. There is an interrelatedness, interconnectedness, which is not so obvious or visible, but it is very real and very strongly and intensely felt when we take the first step in spiritual life. The innate, inherent unity and harmony and oneness of humanity, even the whole creation. So once these ideas can be inculcated, the next question is how to bring it to our everyday life. Do something noble and good. When we try to do something noble and good that's good for others and also for us, it becomes doubly good for us. But when we do the same thing which is exclusively good for us, but may not be necessarily good for others, then it will have an adverse effect. So, inculcating these ideas of harmony, interrelatedness, interconnectedness, and of course karma yoga will be the ideal combination for the young generation.
So there is one more question here. Does karma yoga help to get rid of my prarabdha karma?
Yeah, karma yoga will help you. It is certainly very beneficial. So karma yoga produces the spiritual benefits, which will reduce the intensity of what we may be destined to suffer or face in life. So one of our great teachers, Holy Mother Sishara Devi says, if you pray, we meditate, or in our context, if you do Karma Yoga, what happens, we are generating spiritual benefits, we are increasing our spiritual bank balance. So that will reduce the intensity of what may be in store for us in future. So those who are destined to suffer some serious difficulties may have to face some simple problems, but at a much reduced rate. I mean, the intensity will be reduced. So Karma Yoga can certainly reduce the intensity of maybe unpleasant things that could happen because of prarabdha karmas. So it actually reduces the intensity of prarabdha karma events, prarabdha karma related events.
Thank you. There is one more question from our friend Neil Madhavan. What is the methodology for offering our work to God? What is the tactical process? Keeping God's name in our thoughts at the beginning and end of the work we are doing, or how do we do that?
Yeah, just actually mentally, if you repeat sincerely, then it influences the mind, the mental system. Then it actually influences the way we act. So keeping in mind can be done by reciting the name of the Lord, or maybe just remembering the fact that what I'm doing is my obligation, my sacred obligation to the Lord.
Okay. So those are all the questions we had. There was one more. Yogesh, did you have a question?
I think we can wrap up, Sanjay.
So today somehow I got delayed. I was thinking it's Friday, so actually it is Friday classes begin at 7:30. But today somehow we got delayed, but not too much. But we can spend a little more time if you are interested. If you are interested to ask more questions, most welcome. Otherwise, we will conclude.
The questions are done.
Yeah.
First of all, I think I will thank you on behalf of all the participants for these enlightening and educating 4 sessions.
Yeah.
I think the questions that came up really depict so much people are interested in putting it to practical use. And the diversity of topics we covered were great, coming from Bhagavatam to Bhagavad Gita to Patanjali Yoga Sutra to so. I think I'll thank on behalf of everybody. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank all of you. Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace.